Three men, each separately aware of the same presence, and there was no chaos, no confusion, but there was clarity and companionship. Now, fast forward to September 11th, 2001. Survivors of the Twin Towers collapse also describe a mysterious help. Firefighters reported a man in white guiding them as they carried a woman to safety. Yet, when they turned, he was gone. Others in stairwells said they sensed someone urging them forward, saying, "Keep moving, don't give up." Psychologists say trauma or adrenaline cause these feelings and cause these feelings as if there were a fourth man or a third man in the fire. Trauma or adrenaline, but we have to ask ourselves, why would trauma create courage and clarity in a moment where panic is more likely or more appropriate even? Typically trauma, if untreated, can cause an anxious response, not a courageous response. But could it be that even in those stairwells on September 11th, 2001, in the valley of death, God was there? We just commemorated every year. Different cities, different communities commemorate September 11th, 2001. And we can remember, and we should remember, the stories that these people have of how they survived, how they made it out, how they were able to be stuck, some of them for hours on end. And yet still they were able to find comfort somehow, some way, from somewhere and some person. Daniel 3 records Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thrown into a blazing furnace. But Nebuchadnezzar looks in and says, "Didn't we throw 3 men in the fire? But I see 4 unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Now get this, even the King Nebuchadnezzar, who was an unbeliever, even he saw a 4th man. This wasn't a hallucination. I believe it was God's presence. Scripture confirms this in Psalms 23:4. It says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Isaiah 43:2 promises to God's people, when you walk through the fire, you will not be harmed. You will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. God doesn't always remove the fire, but he promises his presence in it. Science tells us that third man syndrome is the brain protecting itself, as if a neurological safety mechanism suddenly kicks on. A neurological safety mechanism that helps the individual navigate rough terrain or navigate unseen and unforeseen circumstances, and help them navigate even the harshest of circumstances, like Ernest Shackleton. They say that when the body is pushed to the brink of exhaustion, to the brink of starvation or trauma, the mind suddenly creates an imaginary companion to help us cope. Researchers call it disassociative response. They call it a disassociative response, as if our bodies, our minds disassociate from the experience. We separate from the experience of this trauma and from what's really happening around us. And they say it's the brain's way of separating from unbearable stress. There's so many different stories about people who face traumatic experiences and how they oftentimes disassociate, or they just say, "Oh, it just felt like I blinked out," or like I just had a moment where I didn't feel anything. I wasn't there anymore. I wasn't in that moment anymore. Others in similar situations point to endorphins or surges of dopamine, saying the presence is really just chemicals helping us endure the moment. But here's the problem I have with that explanation. You see, hallucinations usually bring chaos, not clarity. Hallucinations usually bring fear, not focus. Just ask the kid who has nightmares that there's an alien standing in his doorway, right? This kid who fears the dark, or who fears terrifying things at night and can't stand to sleep alone. Just ask that kid if if they have clarity in a moment where there is fear, not focus. Sometimes hallucinations can bring confusion, not courage. Yet the people who report the phenomena of this third man or this fourth man in the fire, they don't describe panic. They describe peace. They don't recall hearing nonsense, or they don't recall hearing voices telling them to do things to harm themselves. They don't recall hearing voices telling them to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do in order to survive. But what they recall oftentimes is receiving guidance. In the middle of terror, they say they felt seen, they felt protected, they felt accompanied, they felt peace. They felt like there was this additional presence there walking with them, guiding them along, talking to them, giving them clarity and giving them peace in this moment. Now, this doesn't sound like the brain breaking down to me. It sounds like something or someone breaking through to help, to offer courage, to offer encouragement. Take, for example, soldiers on the battlefield. Some recount hearing a voice, a single clear instruction like move now or march forward or about face, right? These clear instructions, and so when they obey these clear instructions, a moment later, they tell stories of how a shell explodes exactly where they were standing. But if it hadn't been for that voice to tell them to move forward, or that voice to tell them to move on, that voice to tell them to move from the place that they were standing, they would have been right exactly there in harm's way. Or the story of, say, a pilot in combat who suddenly senses, pull up now, before instruments detect the danger. Before the instruments, these state-of-the-art, multi-million-dollar instruments are even able to detect danger. They are able to have a sense that danger's coming, and so they respond in kind because they feel this presence, they feel this urge, they feel this pull or this call in a different way than the way that they're going. These aren't just random survival instincts. I believe that they're directional. I believe that they're timely, and I believe that they are deeply personal to that individual. And then there are survivors from natural disasters, people trapped in rubble after earthquakes or building collapses. They often describe an invisible hand resting on their shoulder, or a voice whispering, saying, hold on, help is coming. When they're rescued, they'll say, I wasn't alone down there. Now, psychology can describe how the brain might experience these moments, but it can't explain why so many of them point to comfort, protection, and divine peace. It's almost as if God has built into our very design a spiritual antenna, an inner sensitivity, if you will, to his presence, and it becomes most active when everything else falls apart. Think about that for a moment. In our moment of greatest need, this superpower, if you will, this sixth sense, this third man, this extra voice, it comes online, and we have access to a world beyond our physical existence. Here's a thought. Maybe psychology and presence aren't enemies at all. Maybe they're allies. Maybe the biological and the spiritual are working together. Maybe the body's survival systems tuned, which I believe are tuned by the Creator, to remind us that we are never truly alone. After all, Scripture tells us in Acts chapter 17, verse 27, that God is not far from any one of us. Elsewhere, it tells us that he is as close as the mention of his name. Psalm 139 declares, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. Think about that. Even when your mind feels like it's fragmenting, or your body feels like it's collapsing, even when your world seems like it's spinning out of control, God's presence has a way of finding you. He reaches through adrenaline. He reaches through exhaustion, through fear. And oftentimes he whispers what these people say that they heard, I'm still here. Or he whispers, move this way or move that way. So could it be that perhaps what science calls an illusion is actually evidence? Evidence not of the mind's power to create, but of God's power to connect in the moment of our greatest need. Perhaps it's not the brain inventing company or making up another presence or making up as if another person is standing there with you in the dark. But perhaps it's the soul recognizing its maker in the fire. Perhaps it's our spirit, our soul connecting to something far beyond our physical existence. Because when you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, the Bible doesn't say you imagine comfort. It says, talking about God, it says, you are with me. So what can we do with this? And before I share what I think we can do with this, I want to share a personal story with you. And I want you to do me a favor. I want you to send me an email at themindfulfarmd@gmail.com. I want to hear your story, or if you know of someone who's had this type of experience where they find themselves in a terrible situation, a traumatic situation, a trauma-inducing, anxiety-inducing, and provoking situation. They find themselves here, and yet they are able to experience and hear that still small voice, giving them instruction, giving them encouragement, giving them strength. Maybe you know of somebody, but email me, make it brief, and I'll read it out loud in a future episode. Because I think that these stories are so important and they're so common, perhaps maybe even more common than we would even imagine. But email me at themindfulfarmd@gmail.com. That's themindfulfarmd, PHARMD, @gmail.com. Make it brief and I'll read it out loud in a future episode. But as far as before I share what I think we can do with this, when I was in high school, I was in going into the 10th grade. I had an experience, and I've shared this in other forms, in other medium, and I've never shared it publicly here in this space, but I was diagnosed. I didn't know it at the time, but it was a moment in my life where I had been diagnosed with meningitis. I'll never forget, it was a Monday morning, and I'm standing there at the bus stop, getting ready to go to school. And my girlfriend at the time, we were standing there together. And I said, I just don't feel good. I don't feel right. I feel like I need to go back home. I had a throbbing migraine. So I left the bus stop. I went home and I slept that entire day, that entire afternoon. That was about 7 a.m. or so, 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning when the bus stop was supposed to be picking us up. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't go to school that day. So I went back home. I laid down, didn't really eat much. My sisters, I believe at the time, they went on ahead and went to school and came home and everything. And I was still lying in the bed, and my mom had gone to work. I was still lying in the bed. Mom came home that night, late that evening, and I'm still lying in the bed. And I'm running a fever. My head is throbbing. Just to even open my eyes is a chore. It's painful. And my mom comes in and she attempts to give me a drink of water. And so she nudges me awake. And I sit up for a little bit and she hands me a cup of water. And I go to sip that water. And the last thing I remember is my head turning to the side. And the next thing I remember is waking up in the hospital. And here's the fill-in story. When my mom handed me that cup of water, the gap of time and space of time from when I blanked out and lay back down, and then later woke up in the hospital. I've been in the hospital, I believe, for 2 weeks. That gap of time, my mom says that I had a seizure in that moment. And she's screaming, she's praying, she's having, really what any mom would do. I mean, she's confused in this moment. Chaos is ensuing. My sisters are screaming. They're having their time. They're doing what they're doing. The ambulance comes. They pick me up. They take me to the hospital. I vaguely remember being in and out of consciousness. I remember being wheeled in, and much of this, I don't know if it was a out of body experience, or if I was, in and out of consciousness when they were wheeling me into the hospital. But I remember a few moments of being wheeled in and out, into the hospital and out of the hospital. And I'm in the bed, and I'm having like this dream-like state, and I'm walking in the hospital in this dream-like state. I'm walking in the hospital, and I'm walking towards this immense light. When I tell people this, a lot of times I don't know if people believe me, or if they think that I'm making this up, but this is a vivid memory, as if it happened yesterday. But I remember walking past this door, this room that was next to me. There was a baby in the room, and crying, and I remember somebody down the hall was crying as well. And I'm walking towards this. I was just about to be bathed in light. And then all of a sudden I heard a voice calling me. And I turned to look back, and I woke up. I came out of my coma. Now, I don't know if, as others explain, sometimes when they have experiences with being bathed in light, if they were getting ready to go on to eternity and go on and be with God. I don't know if that was going to be my destiny at that moment, but it sure did feel like I was dying. And there was a voice that called me back. I later learned that it was my brother who shared with me that throughout his time being at the hospital, that he would call my name. I don't know if he was calling me in that moment, but that voice that I heard caused me to turn around and come back to present, or at that moment, present in physical reality. And I share that story because, and it's a personal one to me, I share that story because that was a time when my family was in a time of great need. I had a terrible bout of viral meningitis, where there's not really much treatment for it. You can't really treat a virus with antibiotics. You kind of just have to let it run its course. But I'm standing there, and I'm having this moment of really, my family really is having this moment of, well, what's going to happen to my brother, my son? What's going to happen to him? Is he going to make it out of this? And then there was that voice. And I don't know if they heard it. I don't know if I was the only one that heard it, but there was this voice. There was this presence that was there with me, calling me back into reality. So here's what we can do with this third man syndrome, as psychiatrists call it. If you've ever felt God's presence in your darkest hour, I want you to know you're not crazy. You're not weak. You've experienced the same God who walked with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And here's what we can do with this. Invite God into your fire. Invite God into your stress. Invite God into your loneliness. Invite God into your pain. His presence is not just psychological comfort. It's power, it's peace, and it's protection. And here's some practical steps we can take. In fear, we need to learn to pause and whisper, God, you are with me. Psalm 46:1 says, God is our refuge and strength, and ever-present help in trouble. If you've ever been through trauma, don't dismiss moments of presence. Don't dismiss moments of God's presence. That may have been him. Use mental health tools, but let faith complete the picture. I'm going to be sharing some very exciting news here in the next few weeks. I'm trying to put it together to announce it. But we can use mental health tools to let faith complete the picture. Psychology can calm the mind. I believe that. I believe with a trained therapist, a psychologist, somebody who truly cares about you and cares about your mental well-being, they can help calm the mind. But I believe that God restores the soul. So ask yourself, what's your fire right now? And can you believe you're not standing in it alone? You see, third man syndrome calls God's presence psychology, but scripture calls it reality. The fourth man in the fire still steps into fires today. Your flames may still burn, your trials may still be real, but God's presence makes all the difference. Listen, I want you to know you are not alone. You are not hallucinating hope. You are not walking with the one who delivers, or you are walking with the one who delivers, who offers comfort, and who shows up in your greatest time of need, your greatest time of need. If this encouraged you, please do me a favor. Share it with someone who needs to know they're not alone. Until next time, breathe, carry what matters, and leave the rest, and stay mindful.